is it's interesting to think about, and quite a good problem to have, if validators cost a lot more one day, right? So I've tweeted about, I talked about before, especially when we had that, when PulseChain first launched, 2 or 3 weeks after that, PLS did a 2.5x or something like that. And I remember doing a validator AMA, I believe, and a tweet talking about it was about 7K or so to become a validator. That assumes, if you were buying it off the market, if you already had a bunch of PLS, you sacked and stuff, that's different too. But in the future, if PulseChain price goes up, that means if you don't already have it and you need to buy it off the market, the price you're going to pay to become a validator goes from, it's around 3,200 today, or maybe around 3,000 since that PLS dipped a little bit today. Let's see, on GoPulse, it's saying around 0.98. And but if in the future, if everything works out well and it goes way up, then we're looking at even 100x from around today's prices, somewhere through there around the 3,200 mark. Would be 320K to become a validator, which is just unattainable for a lot of people. I think even 3,200 for a lot of people who even sacked, especially in a bear market, is hard to come by to even get one validator, let alone the more validators you do, the more you can make. A lot of people want to do more than one. One is kind of, there's this whole conversation before about what the ROI would be, the minimum number of validators to have. What was it? I think I remember talking about K for K tweet around, based on his data a while back too. It was like, I extrapolated maybe 7 validators, 5 to 7 at kind of the lower range of prices to even break even. There's a lot of different costs, if you're doing it in cloud versus at home versus utilities costs and, all the devices, the battery backups, the extra router you may want to run at home for security, all that stuff. But essentially the conclusion was, don't go with like 7 or 5 or whatever the number is, or 10. But the idea was being, the point of it was running more than one, at least near current prices, is not quite the ROI, and you wouldn't be much harder to break even than if you run, 3, 5, 7, 10. So imagine if PLS price goes way up, I guess the ROI would kind of even itself out too. But if you want to run more than one validator in the future and the PLS price is way above what it is now, say it's a 10x, say it's a 50x, 100x, whatever it is, that's a lot of capital to have to deploy just to run one single validator. You can run multiple validators on a server, let's say 100 or so on your average kind of commodity hardware. That seems to make the most sense, or be some kind of consensus. I haven't heard a lot of people say you couldn't do that. Some people say more, some people say less. But I think that this is an interesting point of, if you're in the ecosystem and you believe the PLS price will go up over time and you are interested in becoming a validator, getting the PLS earlier or saving it, or thinking about the people in the future who are going to have to pay a lot more for it if they don't already have it, if the price goes up, is an interesting question. And, Gamma weighed in on this a little bit as well. If you read between the lines, I guess someone's doing well. It is a good problem to have, but it's also one of those things that I think we need to think about too, of what is going to happen. We talked about Alex from Hedron Synergy, talked about Rocketpool fork for PLS as well. I certainly hope that happens. Will it be necessary in the future? Will Rocketpool, will most people even be able to go, okay, let me explain Rocketpool a little bit too. Essentially, let me hit it over Rocketpool. So it's one way to kind of pull in resources to still become part of the validator system, join the network, but more of a pull type stuff. So this came out on Ethereum because having 32 ETH, that could be 10K, 50K, 100K, depending on the Ethereum price. And once the Ethereum price went up so much, just like PulseChain could do, just like any coin could do, at a certain point, it requires a lot more capital to become a validator. So Rocketpool's like, okay, let's, instead of instead of you needing to have 32 ETH, be it validator, set up the network and stuff on your own, there's more ways to do that. Some more centralized, some less centralized than others. So that's kind of like how Rocketpool came about, became super popular. Just trying to scroll through here for a minute. I'll drop this in the chat too, so you guys can read through it. So how Rocketpool works, yeah. Unlike solo stakers who are required to put up 32 ETH for deposit and create a new validator, Rocketpool nodes only need to deposit 16 ETH per validator. So this will be coupled with 16 ETH from the staking pool, which stakers deposit in exchange for RETH, create a new Ethereum validator. It's called a mini pool. So they have all this different ways to basically pool stuff to put up validators and to make it easier and cheaper and stuff to become a validator. Again, this is sort of analogous to what could happen in the future with PulseChain, or what may need to happen unless we do a hard fork or something like that. So I'm not pretending to be a Rocketpool expert or anything. I'm just trying to relate this type of solution, this type of product to, on the Ethereum side, to what could eventually happen or be necessary or just very valuable product to PulseChain. So I ran the poll. What happens if one day it costs, a ton of money to run a single validator? And again, it's kind of like, well, good problem to have, but also when that day comes, yeah, everyone who got in early, hooray, yeah, we don't have to worry about it. We got plenty of PLS, we've already got our validators. They've been burring forever. But what everyone else? What about all the other validators who may want to come from ETH now, or come from, Solana, or come from other networks, other L1s, who are like, hey, I can make either more APY, or I believe in this project more, I believe the price will go up more, whatever their belief is or reason to participate in the network. What if they come over to PulseChain and they're like, oh, I want to become a validator, but it's just crazy expensive to do so. So when Richard, when the dev team and all the PulseChain devs and stuff, when they changed the different parameters to make it, there's side effects to that, right? Short-term and long-term consequences for doing like the 1 million X and like all the different parameter changes and the dilution and the stuff for the network. So some parameters, I suspect the thinking was some parameters work better in the beginning, just like maybe Uniswap v2 fork for PulseX could be better on the start of a new network, start of new coins and stuff, the first year or two, versus the long term, maybe v3 or v4 is better for pump metals and stuff like that goes. So that's why, I've had conversations too about, will we see a upgrade to PulseX to v3, v4 in the future after we've, maximized the ROI that the way v2 works in order to give us on PulseX and the different coins and different liquidity situations and ups and downs and stuff. So right now it costs this much. However, we could hard fork, do a parameter change, change the cost of the stuff in the future in order to make it cheaper, to make it, okay, now if PLS does a 100X or something, maybe at that point, and maybe, well, I guess you'd have to see, does it stabilize there? Is it just a run up? All that stuff. But as the network matures, and if it consistently is very, very expensive to become a validator, maybe there is a hard fork parameter change in the network, and instead of it goes back down to being 3,200 or some other more reasonable number to keep onboarding people while not keeping them away from being a validator, because unless PulseChain price goes way down. That would be funny too if there was a hard fork in the future, and then we said, okay, it's much cheaper to become a validator, and then if we did a hex in the future down 99% or whatever, and then now it's like, I could just imagine like this news flash. Oh my gosh, it's crazy cheap to be a validator. We have all of these new validators spin up, or the other way, we have people not validating as much anymore because they're not making as much money. Interesting scenario as well. It certainly seems like a lot of people are interested in being validators because, wow, we're working on doubling the number of validators in just a few weeks. It's pretty amazing. Like I remember at 20K, we're like, whoa, 20K. The Genesis ones just exited. We're on our own, for the most part, or on the network side on PulseChain. Nothing really, it's kind of like, oh, okay, 20K. then it seemed like just out of nowhere we hit 30K. And now we're, headed towards hopefully up into the right, hopefully to the moon validators. 34K, amazing. I really hope we hit 50K by the end of the year. And with this trajectory, I don't know. I know we got a big pump on validators recently, but that's the cool thing. Once you become a validator, you are usually, you already made the investment, you've already had the cost, and you've already made the decision, you've already got all these things set up. You're much less likely, it's almost like staking. I kind of equate to staking sometimes. You're much less likely to exit unless you really have a good reason, unless it just makes sense. You don't want to do this anymore. You've already been doing it for a long time. You haven't been doing it. Nobody's been doing it for a long time here as far as on mainnet, because mainnet's only been up for about 10 or 11 weeks. So I think being early on validating is just super cool. Seeing these numbers go up, and I like it. I kind of equate it as kind of like almost like staking your PLS, but it's actually doing something. Instead of just being locked in a smart contract, you're actually helping secure the network. You're actually helping it run faster and better, and all that stuff. A lot of great benefits for it. So there's a couple options. I mean, there's probably more than this. This is just the two that came to mind when I was doing the poll. Hard fork, again, change it, make it cheaper. Maybe that's the decision coming up. But a lot of people, like the majority of people, had almost 300 votes. Most of the votes went towards Rocketpool. So, and that's kind of what Ethereum did, right? I don't, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember them changing any of the dynamics or the parameters of the network to make it cheaper to become an Ethereum validator. I don't think that happened. What happened was there were other people building products like Rocketpool and otherwise to make it, to further democratize the validation in a way, and make it accessible for people to participate in the network, still be able to onboard people without them having to have this huge amount of capital to get the ETH, buy the ETH, and then stake it. And of course, all the nerd stuff and all the infrastructure that goes along with it to actually get a validator set up, run it for a long time. Maintenance, there's not a lot, I've talked about this before. There's not a lot of maintenance, at least on the PulseChain validator side. And a lot of it can be automated too. But yeah, it's a decision, and the May came up, and let's see if Alex builds the Rocketpool fork and solves a solution or solves a problem in the future for this, or if we end up hard forking. If Richard, it's like, hey, we're going to hard fork. We want to change up some other parameter. We might as well change this parameter because we feel like it's best for the network. That may work too. And I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of validators. We can maybe it'll be a hard fork. The parameter change. A lot of people will keep it. The other side too. I talked about this before. I think, who knows, future of PulseChain. Who knows, if it truly becomes decentralized, then the network, the voting power on the network becomes in the interest of the people. So even if Richard or otherwise, or a lot of people said, hey, we want to make it cheaper, maybe people do start signaling for other parameters, and a hard fork occurs where we still have people on PulseChain cheap validator side or expensive validator side. And then we have people on cheap validator side, and Rocketpool is super popular in one and not so much on the other. And there's multiple PulseChain now. You never know. It's a blockchain. It can be forked. There can be contentious forks. There can be, soft forks. There can be different things, but that's gonna be interesting to see how much influence and stuff is in the future. After Richard lays the groundwork, there's the OA, there's other entities, there are a lot of benevolent whales that have a lot of control, and should have, supposed to have the best interest of hexagons, pulsecons stuff in their heart. However, an L1 is a little different beast. So I'm interested to see how much of that stays and how much of it really becomes, for better or for worse, what the network becomes in the future.